So I've actually been with Kaiser Permanente for almost 25 years. I have spent that entire time in national marketing within the National Market Research Department. So suffice it to say, I've seen a lot and I have stories. But Joe, Katie, and I, we're really excited to be with you today to tell you a story about how this year, working together, we have completely blown up Kaiser Permanente's new member welcome journey. Okay, blown up might be a slight exaggeration, but we did make some really big dramatic changes. Not because the existing program was broken in any way, but because we knew we could do better. And what we were essentially trying to get to is 100% retention of our new member. Now, I realize this may sound like a lofty goal, but as all of you in the audience who come from healthcare organizations know, we spend a lot of time, money, and effort to acquire these new members. So if we can make sure that these new members feel supported throughout their entire onboarding process, that they feel like that transition was seamless for them, then they're going to be happy. They will want to stay with us, and that ultimately will make Kaiser Permanente happy. Now, before I go any further, let me just pause and make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of how we're defining new members. For Kaiser Permanente, our new members are people who have never been with us before, or they're coming back, but have at least a 1-year gap in their membership. So going back to this lofty goal, Kaiser Permanente, we right now, as much as we would like to, we don't have 100% retention of new members. We have an attrition rate that is around 9 to 10%, and that has been creeping up slightly year over year for the last few years. Now, my department, we have done a lot of research with new members over the years. We are actively sending them surveys, holding interviews with them as we're trying to learn how can we make them more sticky with us? What do we need to get them to do? How can we make them happier? Also, we want to learn about all the different pain points that they're having. An example of this is that we launch an enterprise new member survey that goes out to every new member at their 90-day mark. And so from this, we've learned a lot. For example, we know that if a member tells us that it was very difficult for them to register for an account on our Kaiser Permanente website, then they're more likely to terminate during their first year of membership. We also did some interviews with them last year where we were asking them, how can we be helpful to you during your onboarding? And they did an interesting turnaround where they were telling us, well, you want to be helpful? How about you just ask us, how can we be helpful to you? What do you want? That is the best way to help us. And so keeping all of that in mind, as Kaiser Permanente and Qualified Digital, as we started to go down this journey this year, how are we going to reimagine the new member experience? We wanted to build upon what we already knew, but then we wanted to do more. And really what we wanted to do is specifically ask our members, how can we help you? What do you want? What do you need? We wanted to make sure that we heard everything that they told us, the good, the bad, the ugly. And then we wanted to make sure that we took action on all of that, that we were transparent with them. We showed them the value of everything, and to do all of that in real time. Now, some of you might not be familiar with Kaiser Permanente. Quick show of hands, who's heard of us? Okay, or all of you are familiar. All right, so I can cut this slide down. We are an integrated care system. We're a health plan. We're also a med group. We have our own hospitals, pharmacies, and labs. This makes us an integrated care model. That's fantastic. We have over 12.5 million members. We have a lot of data. We know a lot about them. And essentially, that means that we are able to see a lot. We're able to see everything that our members are experiencing with us along the journey. All the care moments, all the in-between care moments. We have access to all of that data. And best of all, that means we can actually take action on all of that data. Now I'm going to hand this over to Joe so that he can tell us where we started with all of this.
Thanks, Karen. So we started by looking at the parts. So we, as Karen laid out, we've had a lot of member feedback. We had done some additional initial journey design looking into our processes a year ago that led to this work. And what we've been doing and what we do have, and as Karen said, the parts are working, and some of them is absolutely as they're intended to. So for example, one of the core features for new members are our guided member welcome on kp.org, where we take them through those important care tasks, right? We know that getting you in, getting you engaged with a new PCP, building that relationship, that's what leads to loyalty for all of us in the industry, right? But what it doesn't do is, one, when we look at some of the things here, they get to review their benefits. We're not helping them understand their benefits. First, things can be simple, but it can get complicated, right? Depending upon the product and the plan that you have. This is how we're defining our engagement. So if you are a new member who this isn't your priority in your first 90 days, this is time bound, we're actually missing out on some important engagement. We have other ways of engaging, and we do. So within some of those other parts, as new members are enrolled, we have a group that ensures that they receive confirmation of their enrollment. More information to come. Then it goes off to another group in marketing, for example, where we start their new member journey for 4 months, and we start with onboarding them with a lot of content around their new healthcare products. But then as we engage them over the next few months, it's the same. Everybody receives the same piece of information. And then, so the parts, while they have demonstrated some lift, we know we had to do better. The parts are exactly that. They're not a whole, and then they don't add up to a whole. So some of the pain points that came out of this that we wanted to be able to address, really when it comes down to it, is it's about being able to personalize. It's about getting rid of the time-based constraints. It's about becoming behaviorally based. Treat them as they want to be treated, as they need to be treated. We need to understand, though, what's most important to them. And that's one of the big things that's missing. Exactly like Karen said, we're not asking why. And so one size does not fit all. We continue to greet them as if we haven't met them yet. Each time they move to a new group, a new step, because our data is not connected, because the channels aren't orchestrated together. And that's all reinforced by the fact that the organization's doing good work, but doing it in silos, right? So what we kind of needed to flip how we were looking at it. I've been in healthcare now for 5 years. I come from working in service providers like Siemens and Atos. So capability orientation. What I have noticed in observation is we are really good at imposing our problems on our members to solve for themselves, right? So we need to kind of shift. We needed to shift from the idea that we were looking at business processes and optimizing business processes in silos that weren't connected. We were coordinating, but that still only gets you so far. That's a lot of lift, right? So we needed to look at it more from the end to end. If we were going to actually have a true consumer experience, a true member experience, and a true end outcome of getting to a movable goal of 100%, it doesn't have to be achievable, but it should be movable, right? We were going to have to do some things differently. So some examples of that were going to be around how do we start to create some more two-way engagement through the surveys? How do we do a little bit more of that at the right times? How are we going to do that? We have to, and this is a theme that I've heard over the past few days. This is an interesting conversation internally also. When we think of the experience, people don't care that you're the best healthcare provider if healthcare is getting an F or a D across the board for experience, right? Or a C. That just means you're the best C student or the best D student. The consumers want what they get at Amazon. They don't see anymore today that they have to be constrained by legacy platforms, bureaucratic companies, organizations. They want it. They want it much easier, and they want to be treated that way. So how do we start to modernize how we do some of this work, which is part of that upending. So while on one hand, yeah, we are blowing it up in a way, but we're using a lot of the parts that are effective. We're just trying to pull them all together. So as we started to lay that out with looking at all the data, working with Katie, who will come up and talk about the approach that we took in a minute, we wanted to make sure that we were understanding how we were going to measure value at the top as top goals. We have a lot of, and I imagine this is probably similar, you have a lot of KPIs, you're tracking a lot of different things, but are we tracking them to get to the two things that matter the most? One, are we impacting attrition rate? That's it. That's the answer. You can get your survey. So the other one is your NPS. Are we affecting their attrition rate, which means we're giving them a good experience? Are we creating loyalty because they're going to recommend? Kind of gets to be that simple in a lot of ways. There's a lot that goes into impacting those two numbers, though. So we wanted to create a framework that's going to allow us to make sure that everything that we're doing can be measured and meet certain principles. And those principles, while not on here, really came down to kind of rephrasing some of what those strategic pillars are, but rephrasing them in consumer terms. Show me, you know me. So don't ask me to give you my data again. Don't ask me who I am again. Don't give me the wrong information when you do. So show me, you know me. Make it easy. Do the work for me. So that's, start shifting away from making them do our work for them. For us, do their work for them. Listen. So listen and react and respond. And then finally become, if we do all those things, we start to become their trusted advisor. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Katie Templin. Katie's been, and the Qualified Digital team has been working with us. I mean, one of the things that we've known as we've been embarking on this, on our transformation, is we need the outside in, right? We are fundamentally changing how we are going to enable people in the organization to do work. So, I'm a proponent of thinking of capabilities first. Capabilities is a combination of business, process, people, technology, data. When we think of all the ability to do this, it's all technology enabled. We can't do it without technology. Otherwise, we'd already be doing it. And they're not simple technologies. But when we only look at the technology, we forget the people in the process that the technology is supposed to enable. When you have a capability view, you're ensuring that you're thinking of all the parts together and then what it's going to allow you to do. So we have a couple critical partners that we have had worked together for a couple years now. They have their roles, they have their lanes. I think Pat was saying that, or Pam was saying that yesterday, if anybody went to the session in the afternoon. It's super important to rely on the outside in and get your partners working together. It's made them better, whether they think so or not. But
you make me better, John.
Katie's going to talk about how we approached.
Yeah, thank you. So in this track, this consumer engagement track, we've probably heard a lot about customer journey mapping, right? That's an approach that a lot of people are taking. But in my 20 plus years of being a consultant with large healthcare systems, I have quickly and over again learned that the number one obstacle in executing the ideal customer experience is operations. The number 2 obstacle is change management. Those two things are very closely linked, right? Customer journey mapping is not going to address that for us. It's important and it's critical, and we have to be thinking about what the customer is going to be experiencing with us. But we need to do more, and we need to go beyond that. So when we started this project, we decided to take a different approach, one of service design. And service design, for those of you who aren't aware, this is my favorite illustration of what service design does. It's a graphic by Nielsen Norman Group. And the idea behind it is, okay, imagine that you're at a Broadway production. You're sitting in your seat. You're whisked away to some other world. You're watching this beautifully choreographed interaction between the actors, these immaculate costumes, the swell of the music, right? And you're transported into this magical world. And then all of a sudden, there's a loud bang from backstage, or someone forgets to remove a prop, or someone misses their cue, and the magic disintegrates, and you're like painfully aware of the reality around you, that you're in like a tiny wooden seat, and your legs are cramping, and you're holding like a really cheap glass of wine in a plastic cup that you paid like $25 for, right? And so all of a sudden, that production that people spent so much time meticulously planning has fallen apart. And it's really hard to recover from that as an audience member, but also from the cast member, right? Having to pick up and sort of cover up the mistakes that were made. And so what service design does is it considers that, right? It is looking at the consumer experience, what's happening in the front of the stage, something that everyone in the audience is aware of, but it's also looking at the really important things that are happening behind the stage and how those things need to be perfectly connected and in line with each other. So you'll see in the background this large rectangle is a fraction of our larger service design blueprint. And what it does is it has swim lanes. So it has the customer journey, what the customer is doing, thinking at any given moment, right? But it also has what's happening on the service side, the operations, the people behind the scenes, or even in front of the scenes that are interacting with customers and executing on that experience, right? It also accounts for the processes that are happening, the technology, the data that is needed to execute it on all of it. And it's being mapped simultaneously so that you can see those relationships, so that you can see that moment where those things don't quite align, where you're missing something, or maybe there's a redundancy. So here, this piece right up front that we're calling out also speaks to an additional piece of this that we were really focused on, which was being really intentional about the data that we were collecting. So Joe and team have been really focused on building out their CDP, and I'm sure that's something that the rest of you are also either in the midst of or thinking about, right? And one of the pitfalls of CDP work is that people decide that if we have the data, we need the data. All of the data goes in the CDP. And that's it's not effective, it's not efficient. And so what we wanted to do is use this blueprinting to identify the data that we really did need. And we wanted to identify in that moment also how we were going to use it, why we needed it. And so this is just a little piece speaking to the registration process that Karen and Joe both mentioned that was a little more painful than it needed to be, right? And so this is in the area where if someone had started the process and stalled in the middle because it was painful and they just gave up, we today have no way of knowing that. All we're measuring and all we're collecting is that someone completed the process, and that's it. And so we know that there are, 500,000 people who aren't completing this process today. And so we wanted to get ahead of that. We wanted to collect that data and then proactively, to Karen's point, reach out and say, hey, what of these reasons are the reason that you haven't completed this process? Karen's team has done a ton of research. We know what these reasons are already. We have canned responses, and then when someone tells us why, we respond immediately with content or outreach that corresponds with that problem, so that we're solving it in real time, and then we're also able to identify moments of risk and escalate to customer service so that they can reach out at a time that is convenient to the consumer and solve the problem and get ahead of that attrition that we're seeing. So this other moment is one that you're also probably all familiar with, and that's of proxy relationships, right? So today, we know that a lot of members are not actually making their own appointments. They're not actually selecting their own PCP. They're doing that. A spouse is doing that for them. A parent is doing that for them. An adult child is doing that for them, whatever that situation is. But they're not the exclusive caregivers, right? And so what we wanted to make sure was that we were able to account for those relationships and the complexity there within, and make sure that everyone was aware of what was happening. So if my husband asked me to make him an appointment and then he goes and does it on his own, I'm aware that that happened, and I don't waste my time going in and trying to find him an appointment, right? So this is what we're calling mirrored communications. And this took a lot of data that we didn't have. These relationships are not simple. And we did not have those relationships demonstrated in the CDP. And so that was a really important moment where we had to do a lot of work to figure out what we needed to know about these people and how we were going to build out the fields in a way that allowed us to see and react to those relationships. So throughout this process, those blueprints do not make themselves. I'm not the only person in there putting those little boxes and arrows together, right? Like, we started out by having workshops 2 or 3 times a week with, I think the original group was about 10 to 15 people. And so every one of those workshops, someone was bringing a new piece of information. Hey, I just learned that this group over here is doing this thing, and it probably affects us, and we should document that. And, and it went on and on and on like that for months, because to Joe's point, everyone is working in their own little fiefdom, right? Like, they have their own territory, they do their thing, no one's talking to each other. So this process, by its nature, forces that collaboration. It forces people to come in and tell everyone about their part, and then this interaction where they're like, we're doing that exact same thing over here. Why are we both doing this thing? So it ends up being a little bit therapeutic in a way, but it's absolutely critical in getting this down, because most of the information that's in that blueprint, the as-is state, isn't documented anywhere. It lives in people's brains. People that have been with KP for 25 years, right? So really, really important. Huge village of people that went into putting together. It has grown beyond that 10 to 15 people. It is now something like 75, 80 plus. More and more groups have come on board over time, because we've realized that they know something we need to know, or they do something that we need to be able to leverage in the future, right? So it's been critical. So many really, really smart people involved in this. But when you have 80 plus people in a meeting, it's really hard to move forward. And so decision making is critical. We have a core group of people, Joe and Karen included, who were the people on the line to put a stake in the ground, to be the tiebreaker, to go behind the scenes and work the executive leadership team to get stuff done when it needed to happen, right? And just shut things down if people were starting to go down a rabbit hole or spiral. So it's really important to getting things going. So as Joe mentioned, we started this as a marketing automation program, and figuring out how to coordinate with Qualtrics, a survey tool. It quickly grew. We quickly realized that we could not really affect change without taking this to a multi-channel state and tying all of the different pieces together. So very quickly, the portal, kp.org, came into play. The mobile app came into play. We're touching SMS and IVR and phone and the customer service channels, and all of those things are all now part of this experience and tightly coordinated and sharing data. So, this isn't rendering. There's supposed to be pictures there. Apologies for that. But when you break it down, there are 3 main pieces of work as part of this. And we have individual teams in each, and then leadership who sort of spans over top. The 3 of us are part of that leadership team. But the magic link is number 1. This is to solve for that registration problem, and I'll go into it in a little more specificity in a second. But it's a term that y'all are probably familiar with. Direct-to-consumer is doing a lot of this, where you don't remember your password, we'll send you a magic link, and you'll just automatically be in your account, right? That's what we're going for. Second one, personalized onboarding. To Joe's point, we don't want to treat everyone the same. We don't want to assume that the care looks the same to everyone, because it doesn't. So what can we do in upfront to learn more about people and be able to target them appropriately and in relevant ways? And then the third is behavioral retention. So how can we trigger messages? How can we outreach? How can we be supportive based off what we see you're doing? We have the data. We know everything that you're doing throughout your entire healthcare journey. So how can we trigger things based off of that rather than month 1, everyone gets this. Month 2, everyone gets that, which is what's happening today. So the magic link, this is just a little sliver of that giant blueprint I was showing before, but this is what we would have to build if we didn't do the magic link. There's a lot of complexity. There's probably even more than is in this little screenshot. There are branches and tendrils and all sorts of gnarly things that we would have to build to account for all of the different things that could go wrong. So it was an easy sell up to leadership to say, hey, we're going to take all these resources that would be building that, and instead we're going to focus them on making this thing easier. And so what we're doing is we had, to Joe's point, during enrollment, we're collecting everything we need to know about you to create an account, and yet we're still asking you to do all of that over again to create an account. So what we're doing is behind the scenes, we're authenticating you, and we're creating your account for you, and all you need to do is set up a password, and we're done. Very complex. A lot of really smart people behind the scenes to make that happen, but it will be huge in changing how people interact with us from day one. The other thing we're doing, and this is probably familiar to anyone who's used something like Noom or Headspace or Calm, right? It's when you're first onboarding with us, we're asking about you. What's important to you? How do you think? What is healthcare in your mind? What can we do to support that? So we're making it easy. It's just 4 questions, big buttons. It doesn't take too much effort to complete. But what we're doing with those responses is we're segmenting you. So KP has done a ton of research. They have behavioral segments. We are using these questions to then identify which segment to which you belong, and then we're orchestrating communications based off of that, right? And ultimately, your portal and your app experience will also be personalized based off this, not just during onboarding, not just during your first 90 days, but throughout your time with KP, and it will get smarter and smarter and smarter because we can see how you're behaving, and we can say, hey, you actually misrepresented yourself. You're not in this segment. You're in this one over here, and we can move you. So that brings us to the unified customer profile.
So how are we going to make this happen? And how are we in a position to be able to do this as well? So as I was mentioning, we've been on a journey to build some of these capabilities for a couple of years. Hey, Natalie. And so what we're able to bring to the table to help accelerate this is the work that we've been doing first and foremost starting on our consumer data platform. Most critical capability in that, and really the key is that unified profile. Now, while Karen and I sit in marketing, this is not for marketing only. Marketing is the organization that does and should know the consumer, the member, the best. They're the ones that should have that core set of data for everyone and help bring it together. And so when we think of this, we don't think of it as a marketing tool only. We think of it as an enterprise tool for the overall KP experience for all of our audiences. So when we say unified profile, we are meaning our CDP contains our prospects. It'll contain leads. We'll be able to bring those over through the unified profile, through their digital ID that we develop for them or create for them early on, carry over as a member, and we'll be able to connect that core profile, all the core person information with their member information, with their care information, with their also from a B2B perspective. We're not losing sight of the fact that our members are also part of employer bases, right? And our employers have needs for understanding those members in ways they want their members to be supported through their healthcare packages. So we are thinking of this from a second sale perspective for those members. We're also thinking about how we use that core profile, as a business contact. and then how we're then aligning with other organizations like the sales organization to support and the B2B marketing teams and sales and account management teams for a much more tightly integrated sales and marketing growth plans and work. So in our profile, in our CDP, we've been at it for about 2 years, and starts with connecting all of the data that we have. And as Katie was mentioning, and as I've been observing in some of these sessions, there's different ways to go about how you're going to build your CDP, right? What are the use cases? Are you trying to do upper funnel? We started more from the member perspective. We used a Medicare for our first use case, members aging into Medicare. Everything has pros and cons. The big pros in that, though, were it's a program and a journey that has a lot of parts to it. So therefore, it had a lot of core data. And some of the principles that we used, one was to focus on activation. What is the data that we need for activation? How do we structure that data for activation? Knowing that business intelligence, analytics, segmenting, modeling would come next. If we started there, we would just bring in all of our existing data. We'd mix it with a little bit of the pilot data, and it would just tell us the same thing. So tens of millions of dollars down the drain there. So activation was a core principle. We focused on the data that we needed to be able to activate campaigns and build a profile from that perspective. The other principles are not to go after, we go after sources, but we don't go after every table and every piece of data in there. We're bringing in selected data, and then we bring it up and we create layers of logic. Then it's integrated into Marketo, which is where Qualified Digital has been helping us in our path to move from our current set of discrete touch points and channel engagements that we have to, and some of you may have to do this also. You have to almost, bring a file here, bring a file here, bring a file here. We're using Marketo as our tool to help us orchestrate across those channels, make it easier to dynamically create our lists, and do a wholesale migration of our current work, which are about to complete, thanks to the team here, in next month. So everything will be on Marketo. And it will all have, and all of our current engagement will be enabled by the data in the CDP. So that was our first priority. And as we go into next year, then we'll look at how we then we'll build out the reporting, the semantic based reporting, the analytics, connecting all that data with other data. We currently have in the profile about 600 data attributes. Some of those are required in order to create the campaign layer that integrates directly with Marketo, which has about 130, 140 of those fields. And across the data that we have, it includes membership data, it includes just basic data about the person, it includes data from Salesforce from their enrollment journey. It includes our membership systems data. It includes some of our clinical data already. And so we have and some more. And it will include everything that's related to behavioral interactions, all their activity across the different touch points. So that we can start connecting that, which will then be able to feed some of the analytics. But right now, we're focused on what the data we need is to trigger the next step and orchestrate the experience. So that's how So why are we able to do this, and how could we do it? It's because we've been on this journey for a little while, and this is going to be our first. Our first use case or first test, if you will, of actually using it to orchestrate across all of our channels. We've had it built separately and distinct. Web was a separate thing. All the other channels were over here. Data was hard to get to. We built and co-created and co-located the profile creation and augmentation enrichment with our digital partners that's enabling our kp.org experience. So that was a strategic change that we made early on that has probably taken a few years off of what the project timeline would be to get to the point to be able to do something like this to support both care and coverage experiences.
And so when I was mentioning earlier that when we started down this work, we wanted to say, got to ask our members why. To keep moving forward, we need to continue to ask why, right? A lot of that might be traditional market research, the surveys, the focus groups, et cetera. It's also going to include unsolicited feedback. It's going to include those proactive outreaches so we can find out, if you're an unengaged new member, is it because you simply want to be left alone? Totally legitimate. We can do that. But if you're stuck, we need to know that so we can get you that help. It's taking all of that information, feeding it back into the CDP, the necessary parts, not everything, what we need, to continue to build that unified profile so we can see on an individual level, oh, this is Karen's journey along all the way. Here's where she told us she was having an issue. Here's the service recovery that we did. What impact did we see from all of that? So we can see it individual, and then we can see it at a large scale. So we can start identifying, okay, this is a big issue right here. KP, fix this, and you will now impact millions of your members. So that is what all of this work will allow us to do.
And when we were reviewing the roadmap with our sponsors in August, they asked us to accelerate the roadmap. That's no surprise, right? And so all of the work that you're seeing is targeted for going live in December. And the objective there was, if we're really going to try to move faster, that's a common theme in healthcare, right? It's hard to do that. But also more materially, how can we impact what I call our incoming class of new enrollees that the largest chunk will come on board in January. One of the things we haven't talked about and related to the data that we did have is we have that enrollment data already. So while we have one group who is doing those enrollment confirmations somewhere else, they're pulling it from the same systems. They have the logic we needed. So we're collapsing that. So we're actually going to be triggering their onboarding with their enrollment as soon as we get their enrollment confirmation and their effective date. So that's a big win. That's going to automate that, and that enrollment confirmation contains that link to register automatically, and then the wizard to be able to ask you about your interests beyond what we know we need to and want to engage you with on the clinical side and the care side. That will go right after they register. They'll move right in from first sign-on and go right into the onboarding wizard. The data will come back into the CDP, and we'll start to kick off a number of different types of engagement streams based upon the way they answer those questions. What are the ones that are most important? So it's a lot of work that was on a roadmap that hadn't necessarily been fully solutioned, fully laid out, and in the nice, neat, perfect way everybody wants to see and needs to know and so forth. So what we really needed to be able to do is balance two competing things. One is we know that perfect is the enemy of good, but we really try to make things perfect, right? It's healthcare, we don't like things to go wrong. It's the experience. We want it to be the best thing that it can be. But that sometimes gets in our way. And is good enough? Are we really saying the trade-off is perfect or good? Vince Lombardi gets the quote, but I went to the University of Connecticut, so Gino Auriemma is my coach goat, if anybody knows about women's basketball and UConn. He quotes Lombardi all the time around his team. I mean, that program they build a program that pursues excellence or pursues perfection, and they're excellent, right? Because they're pursuing perfection. And so this was about trading off the fact that we need to start working towards 100% attrition rate now. It's not sustainable to continue double-digit attrition rates voluntarily, voluntary attrition rates. So how do we get the teams to work differently, change what their aspirations are, worry less about some of the smaller KPIs and metrics, worry less about whether it's perfect, and how can we wholesale change that first impression that they're going to get in those first couple of days. Those set of steps that I laid out. Those don't, we don't ask them right now about what's most important to them and how we should engage them. 2, those other steps take a cover, can be up to 6 weeks. So we're going to shift that into 3 days. And we have plans on how, if not every single piece is ready in 3 weeks, we have plans on how we can roll that out, how we just iterate on that. And so that's one of the reasons that we're able to move so quickly. And then I'll just, highlight a couple more. I talked about the structured data already. It depends upon your approach and where you're coming from in your consumer data platform, your profile journey. This was ours. We're picking from different methodologies. We look at the methodologies as toolbox, product, agile. We're also using principles of flow and velocity. So part of the flow, the theory of constraints, if anybody's familiar with that, that's where we're kind of setting that 100% movable goal, right? What does it take to get there and do that? And how do we get the work moving in chunks so that we can get to kits of work that can be handed off and executed quicker. And then I would say the last things, one at the top, the executive leadership, they asked for it to be accelerated. We haven't committed a date, and we won't. We're just going to tell them when we think we're ready, sort of. But meaning we have a target date, but it's not a commitment. Nobody's in trouble if we don't meet the date. We're going to be pretty close, and that's what matters most. It's ultimately how do we focus on getting to the work to deliver the outcome for the year, not do we hit a project milestone, and then make bad decisions or shortchange ourselves. In the meantime, and then leveraging teams like Qualified Digital, our TDB partners. Deloitte has been with us on that journey. The teams work fantastic together. Can't thank them enough for that. And I think Karen's going to talk a little bit about how we are going to measure success.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to blow by these because I want to leave us time for questions. We got to measure success, right? All of this work has been fantastic. If we don't measure it, did it really happen? Really, at the end of the day, what we want to hear from our members is they're going to stop saying too hard and everything is going to move to it was very easy. That's what we want. I know that's anecdotal, so we'll parse all the comments, see if we can get there. At the same time, we do have metrics that line up to this framework that Joe went over earlier. He mentioned NPS. Yes, we will look at NPS. We will go see if that is going up. We'll see if people's overall opinion of Kaiser goes up. We'll see if those effort ratings, that moves from very difficult to very easy. Most importantly, what we want to see is the call volume to our member desk, our member help desk. Is that going to go down? I think that is something that we really, really want to impact because we know that, okay, let's be honest. Who really wants to pick up the phone and call the help desk these days? If people are being driven there, it's not because they want to. I mean, yes, there'll be a few that want to, but mostly they just want help. So if we can get them that help without them having to pick up the phone, that helps them, it helps us. That's success. so with that, I will ask, are there any questions? Anthony.
Yeah, we're going to start looking at that. We're going to start going into that this year. Some of that has started, but we're going to start taking a harder look. I think, AI is going to be super critical, super important. I look at this as, first, contact center as a lead strategy is not a good strategy anymore, right? We have the tools. Why do we need them? Because we don't have a good experience end to end. We're not orchestrating it. So I think, my view and the way we're approaching it is going to be in parallel. We do need to go mine that, right? And we do need to improve that, and there's tons of opportunities to do that. I think also the ability to just reduce some of the contact center outreach and some of the confusion is a truly orchestrated end-to-end journey where all of the touch points and all of the channels mean something, just as most of your experiences in other industries and in other apps that you're using is, right? So if we can get some of that right, we don't need the AI to be the saving grace or the savior. It will then just be able to take us to another level. So I think we're looking at it in two steps that way. It's a great question.
John?
I might have missed you saying something about this earlier in the talk, but what CDP platform are you adopt or are you using for this?
We actually built
one.
We built one. Yeah. So. For the profile, so that's one of the things that Deloitte brought to the table. We looked at a number of different options. So when we were doing the RFP a few years ago, the different partners brought forward different approaches. Some of them were what we ended up choosing, which is really leveraging Deloitte's their CDP that they use for their clients, right? So basically their service delivery model. We've essentially leveraged that and we've built that internally. Then with the idea that it leaves us more flexible on how we layer on top of that. So those are all, 20 years in IT managed services, there's all different strategies around how much vendor lock you do want, how much you don't want. Sometimes it's fine, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it depends upon the size of the organization. So there's no, it's what makes sense for us. Doesn't make sense for everybody all the time. So it all depends where you are. But we're going to be looking at then how we layer on to get to, Marketo's only going to take us so far, right, in terms of orchestration. We're going to need to layer on to that.
Yeah, Reed.
So much of the listening was like it's trying to inspire action. Actually, ask them what's happening, ask them what they want. Mm-hmm. You then, I guess, need to pass that to operators to go and engage with that person. I would love to hear a little bit about the complexity of the markets and the way that operational lift sort of follows.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have 1 minute. Well, yes, it's hard. So what we've been doing, we started with an aftercare visit where we actually reached out to all the managers in the departments where members were being seen. And we worked with the leaders there to say, we need you to step up. And we need you to be willing to take on this work. We know it's going to be hard. And we know that it might not seem that exciting, but it's really, really important. But what was interesting is as we started doing this, everyone said, now that's going to be my day job. I'm no longer going to be able to actually do what I was hired to do. I'm just going to be calling members and apologizing, not what we saw at all. It was only about 4% of everything that we were receiving required someone to make a call. Everything else was just raves, kudos, people getting called out by name who normally never get mentioned because they're not a doctor. And so I think that for us was a really big pivot point as we started reaching out to more operational leaders to say, yes, you're going to have to do a little bit more work, but it's not going to be as bad as you think. It's actually going to be really, really good for your teams.
Yes.
I promise my question is short and quick. So you have you talked about your CDP. Do you also have a master data management system? Like, so you were able to unify,
Do you want to take this?
Or at least identify the different sources to feed into your CDP. But just as an organization, have you been able to get a handle on like data authorities? You know?
There's a lot of work in progress on that. So yeah, I would say we're making up for a lot of that in what we're in chasing down the data, working with the data sources, the data owners, the data lineage. It's getting, and so there's a lot of parallel work going on to be able to do that, so that as a whole, even outside of the CDP perspective, we have that. But we've had, I would love to have said yes. I'd have to get back to you on that one, because there's a couple. I don't know how we're actually thinking about that as it's an individual solve, but we are there's a variety of different tools that we're using, and like, so for example, Calibra is going to handle is where we're putting a lot of our application information in, put our data where the data lineage will be stored, things like that. It'll probably be they'll be surrounding that. I don't think that will do it in and of itself. It'll be a set of tools. It won't be just one. Yeah.
Thank you. Feel free to just come to us if you have any questions. We're here. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.